following with the common objections made by some church members is the issue of depression, right? I have heard some people claim that if someone has depression, I mean, some Christian has depression, they are under sin or doing something wrong in their spiritual life. What do you think about that? Yeah, is really depression a sin?
Yeah. Well, is depression a sin? That there's not a yes or no response to that. Can depression lead you to sinful behaviors? Yeah. But is depression in and of itself a sin? I don't think so. So, because we see Job is severely depressed in the Bible. In fact, he makes a plea to God for death. He has suicidal thoughts, right? But he stays in relationship with God. He stays connected to God. He, in fact, voices a lot of objection to what God has done. He expresses a lot of anger to God, but yet he's still in relationship with God. So he is probably, the most common example that we see in terms of like somebody who in the Bible who is navigating depression. But is depression in and of itself a sin? No, but can it lead you towards sinful behaviors? Absolutely. Can it lead you towards doing things that leads you towards isolation? Um, not being connected to your community, not engaging in spiritual disciplines, not praying? Absolutely. But is it in and of itself a sin? No. Is anxiety in and of itself a sin? No. Can it lead you to sinful behaviors? Yes. Yes. However, the scripture tells us with, for example, with depression, like scripture meets these depressive symptoms with comfort. It says, come to me all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And it says, like, God comforts the downcast. This is 2 Corinthians. God comforts the downcast. I am with you, says God, all throughout scripture. Isaiah, the Psalms, Proverbs, Jeremiah, I am with you. Okay. The same with anxiety. Anxiety usually in scripture is usually talking about fear. Okay. And it's saying like, don't be afraid. I sometimes when we hear sermons taught on like, fear, it like where it's like, don't be afraid. I hear the tone totally different in scripture. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Come to me. Come to me. So for both anxiety and depression, the invitation is towards righteous living, which is you might still have symptoms related to depression and symptoms related to anxiety, but be in relationship with God. Be in relationship with God. That is what scripture calls us to. You might be afraid. You might be overwhelmed. You might be depressed. Come to God regardless. Go to God. That is the invitation. Go to the Lord. Again, it is not a sin in and of itself, but what is it leading you to? Is it leading you to God, or is it leading you towards isolating behaviors, towards behaviors that are moving you away from God, which is a sin, right?
Sure, sure. We can say that depression is like any other physical ailment, right? Whether it's a headache, heart attack, or a broken leg. Some even mention that it can be a genetic condition, right?
Yeah, so some people have natural tendencies, like, or have like even like genetics, or genetically kind of hardwired towards depressive or anxious dispositions.
Mm.
And so if I come in and I have major depression, it's like, well, that means like in part my neurotransmitters are not firing the way that they ought to. And I might need some help. I might need therapy. I might need medication, antidepressants. I might need something even more than that. Okay. Same with anxiety. My neurotransmitters are not working the way that they ought to. This is a brain. I mean, this is something in your brain not quite functioning well, and you need outside intervention. Okay, so you might need a little bit of help with for anxiety, like maybe some beta blockers or some anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant. I'm, in terms of diagnosing the problem, diagnosing it accurately, you're going to need somebody who is an expert in their field, whether it be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Again, similar to the analogy of heart issues, right? So it can go from, you might need some medication for intervention, you might need some lifestyle changes, you might need to eat a little bit differently, you might need to exercise a little bit more. But these are all to be diagnosed by a professional, right? Professional who has studied this. Somebody who's maybe a cardiologist, if they have heart issues, who's studied it for their entire career. Well, as a psychologist, like I am studying like how does depression manifest? What are the symptoms of it? What does it look like? And where does it come from? This is what I spent my career studying, right? Is depression, anxiety, trauma. And so that is why it is so important as, leaders in the church to know, oh, just like I'm going to send somebody to the hospital if they have a broken leg or if they're having like significant, heart failure, I'm going to send somebody to another professional if they have severe anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation.